Hi, this is Sergeant Betsy Brandner-Smith with the National Police Association, and this is the NPA report. Today we have with us it's somebody I've known for quite a long time, and she's a real role model for not just women in law enforcement, but really everyone in law enforcement, and I want the public to get to know her. Commander Paula Balafas, welcome to the show.
Betsy, thank you so much for asking me to be on. It's a real honor to be here with you.
Now, Commander, you are currently the president of the National Association of Women Law Enforcement Executives. That's quite a title. Can you tell us about NALI?
Yes, so I hadn't actually known about NALI as a young police officer. I was a detective with a Denver metro area police department when a female division chief from another agency wrote to my police chief and said, "Shame on you, you have no women in the rank of sergeant or above. I challenge you to send 3 female detectives or police officers to this national conference. It's called NALI, and we think it would be really great for them." And actually, within a year of attending my first conference, I made sergeant.
That's fantastic. And one of the reasons is, having gone to NALI as a young sergeant, there's so many women executives and women in law enforcement. And as women, we sort of get isolated in our own agencies where we don't see a lot of other women. We don't see women in rank. The NALI conference is, it's just incredibly motivating, isn't it?
So that first conference was in Madison, Wisconsin. The chief of police at the University of Wisconsin-Madison was Chief Sue Reisling, and she'd been active in IACLEA, the accredited body for higher ed police departments, and she had been one of the founding members of the National Association of Women Law Enforcement Executives. So here in Colorado at the time, that was 20 some years ago, I hadn't really seen many police chiefs who were female or sheriffs who were female, but I attend this conference and I see people from the West Coast, from the East Coast, from the Deep South who are women in command positions and leadership positions. And what was really fascinating about the conference for me was that everybody got along. Everybody was there to help each other. And really, some of the core values of NALI are to lead, inspire, and mentor. And I feel like that had happened for me from that very first conference through today. And having those networking options and opportunities and being able to connect with people. And we really are committed to helping each other out.
And the thing that I want people to know about NALI as well is that men are involved too. This is not some man-hating organization. NALI is truly an all-inclusive, all-encompassing organization trying to get people to pursue and thrive in those command positions, right?
That's absolutely correct. In fact, I was in Boston last summer attending PERF's Senior Management Institute for Police, and I was trying to get people from the class, men in the class, to run for office. I thought it would be fantastic if we had a more diverse board, but you're absolutely right. There's no man-hating going on. We fully support our brothers in law enforcement, just the way that they support us. It just gives women in law enforcement an opportunity to have those different connections. We definitely have different experiences than men do in the field, and we still make up only about 13 to 14% nationally of most police departments. And unfortunately, some departments, it's as little as 1 to 2%. And those women can really feel isolated. And we're just giving them a chance to connect with something a little bit bigger than maybe the agency they're in right now.
Well, and we talk about supporting each other, and now we desperately need community support because there is really a minority faction in this country, a small percentage of people who are talking about defunding the police. What do you think the defunding police movement means to law enforcement, both personally for you there and also nationally?
You know, just speaking from my heart, it hurts my heart that people think that people like you and I get into law enforcement for any other reason other than wanting to help people. I was talking with one of our student athletes last week, one of the women's basketball players where I work, and I asked her, I said, why do you think people get into law enforcement? She said, to help people. I said, that's exactly right. that is our core driver, I would say, for most people who get into law enforcement. You do have outliers and people who don't follow the rules, and that ruins it really for the profession. We have a law enforcement code of ethics. We have policies and procedures in departments across the United States and across the world. And you have people who are trying to do the right thing. And I think it would be really important for citizens to know that. Where I work at the University of Colorado Boulder, we have student groups and student advocacy groups who have been particularly impacted and traumatized by a lot of things that have happened this year in policing, those awful incidents that we've seen. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. I could spend the whole 23 minutes of our interview listing cases that have gone horribly wrong. And my heart really goes out to those groups. What's been great in my personal environment or my work environment has been to watch my chief of police engage with those students and give them opportunities to come in and sit on interview panels for the police department. They're going to be part of an assessment center coming up for a commander process, and giving them a voice, and also giving them an opportunity to see really what the police department is about and get to know us one-on-one. And I think that is incredibly important, not just on the local level, but I think that nationally, if there were a way that police leaders could be reaching out to people in their community and having the conversations. As you and I both know, when we talk about defunding anything, we're taking money away. Well, in police departments, just like in most government entities, you have most of your money going towards personnel costs and training costs. And so when we're talking about, as a country, trying to defund a government operation, you're either talking about cutting people or cutting training. Well, I think that a lot of people would agree in many of these really awful instances that we've seen over the summer. The downside is that if you take away training from departments that already don't get enough training, you're going to have more of these incidents occur, not less. And you're looking at massive amounts of retirements from LA to NYPD. And we're going to have a harder and harder time trying to recruit the right people. And by the right people, I mean people who can pass a background check, who can pass a drug test, who can pass a polygraph, who can get through a psychological exam. And it's becoming harder and harder to attract the type of candidates that, number one, want to be a police officer, number two, are willing to take the pay that isn't always so great in some parts of the country. And then number three, be willing to put up with some of the abuse that we're getting right now. And just because somebody ends up getting hired doesn't mean that they ever get through the police academy or get through training. But it's becoming really challenging, I think, for departments across the U.S. to be able to attract, hire, and retain really high quality candidates.
Well, and I think that you make a good point that's important for people to understand. When someone wants to be a police officer, they don't just put in an application and they're hired the next day and in the police academy. It's a lengthy process of tests really designed to weed out people. So the written test, the physical agility, the psychological, and then once everybody passes that, then they go to the police academy. If they make it through the police academy, and not everyone does, then they go to a field training program that sometimes in many agencies lasts for months, and they have to get through that. Then they're on probation for a period of time. And this is all designed to make sure that we have the best of the best on our police departments. And unfortunately now it's getting more and more difficult to recruit quality candidates, isn't it?
It really is. And you know, that sort of begs the question, how do we create and recruit departments to get officers within our departments that accurately represent the community? I know, at least for our agency, we really want to hire a more diverse workforce. We do a recruitment plan every year. We try to change up that recruitment plan and figure out how we can attract more female candidates, how we can attract more underrepresented populations into the department. And we make minuscule advances here and there. My particular department is now 19% female, which we've really tried hard to get to for the last 3 years. But we still struggle to attract, I'd say, communities of color, communities that are underrepresented, not just in law enforcement, but in government in general. And we desperately want to hire those people. They're either not interested or something along the way occurs where people are washing out of the academy, to your point, or washing out of field training, or not making it through probation. And I don't have specific examples. It's really hard to attract people into a profession that is predominantly white and male.
It's just that not everyone is interested in being a cop. It truly is, and you and I are very similar in this. It's very much a calling. And
it very much is.
Yeah, and you have to be willing to give up your nights and your weekends for the, first half of your career, if not your whole career. And you have to be willing to be very physical, to get dirty, and to see things. Your average police officer sees more trauma and tragedy in the first 3 years of their career than most people see in a lifetime. Not everyone wants to sign up for that, right?
It's so true. I've had conversations with young people on campus about, hey, have you thought about becoming a police officer? And a lot of people just aren't that interested in signing up for that trauma, for giving up nights and weekends. And like you said, you and I have been doing this a long time. For me, this is my 31st year in law enforcement. So I've now become one of the dinosaurs I thought I'd never be. So I can see it through the lens of a long career and seeing peaks and valleys in recruitment, in support for the police, and cultural changes. But you're absolutely right. It's not something everybody wants to do, just like not everyone wants to be a firefighter or a paramedic or a teacher. My goodness, teachers, my heart goes out to them. They have such hard work. Nurses have such hard work. Our military personnel, not everyone is cut out for every type of job that's out there. And even to that point, sometimes it's all about fit. An officer that might succeed in a major city police department is not going to be successful in a rural sheriff's department or even in a university setting. So it's important to select the right people for the right skill set for any given department.
Right. And let's talk about that, because, one of the things that we always talk about when we talk about women in policing is one of the things that we bring to the table is a natural ability to be able to communicate. And in these times of talking so much about de-escalation, women are, not that men aren't, but women are just naturally talented at that, correct?
I believe that's true. There are a fair number of studies out there that seem to indicate that women use force less than men in policing, in law enforcement, and trying to figure out the nexus about why that is. But to your point, I think most women's strong suit is communicating, and it all starts with communication. If you can't communicate effectively, you can't de-escalate a situation, and using force tends to escalate rather than de-escalate.
Right. But yet we have to be ready to use force. And then that's what, when we're recruiting young women, we say, you may not have to fight as much as a male, just because people tend to be more, they tend to be calmer around women. Women are able to calm them down, but you have to be ready, right? To be physical. You have to be ready to use force. You have to be ready sometimes to use fatal force, correct?
Absolutely. And I think that in recruiting, we have to explain that you learn all of those skills in the academy. And then it's your responsibility, once you get out of the academy, out of field training, off probation, that you continue to work on those skills. And a huge part of that is knowing your policies and procedures, your state laws. You have to know what you can do and when you can do it. And then it's really being able to have that quick balancing act in your head about what to do and when to do it. PERF teaches an integrative communication and tactics class, or ICAT. And that seems to have been very successful for some major city departments across the US recently in terms of de-escalation and lowering their use of force incidents. And I really think that's the wave of the future. And it's teaching all police officers how they can de-escalate through communication. And that's not giving up your tactics in any way, shape, or form. It's just being able to de-escalate before you actually have to use force.
Right. And yet we have, in fact, let's talk about training. We have
Sure.
to train for all these things. And now with the defund or the reimagine policing movement, we're hearing a lot of negative things about officer survival training. I My husband and I both are those warrior trainers where we teach cops how to take care of themselves. And teaching cops to be warriors is not teaching them to make war. It's teaching them the values of what a warrior is, you know, duty, honor, courage, loyalty, strength, all those things, selfless service that you want in your police officer, no matter where you live. How do we balance officer safety training with things like, for example, community policing?
Well, we should all be doing community policing. I think it becomes more challenging in larger urban areas where you are call to call to call to call all shift long, and you can't really commit to developing those relationships within a community. And I think, at least in terms of training, it's not thinking that you can have an hour of community policing, you're going to have 5 hours of firearms. You have to think of it more integrated. So one of the things I think is particularly successful is scenario-based training. So you're maybe starting a scenario, having a conversation with a citizen, and then that escalates into somebody comes running into your scenario telling you that there's been a stabbing down the block. Then you have to shift gears and you have to run down the block in the training center, and deal with the situation there. And that might involve de-escalating someone. It might involve going into a firearms training simulator and then responding to cues on a firearms training simulator. So I think integrating these bits and pieces are far more important than just having these blocks of training where you're only focused on one thing. And I think that's going to teach our younger officers, our newer officers coming into the field now, that it's really it's a scale of different things that could happen on any given day. Now, again, you and I have been in law enforcement a long time. We know that your day can go from 0 to Mach 10 in under 5 seconds. And it's having the awareness that you have to be ready to use force, but you also have to be willing to have, those conversations, building relationships, and knowing that your day can be anywhere in between those two extremes.
Well, and I've got to say that is one of the best things about being a cop. That's what I would tell young people is in the 29 years that I was on the job, I never had the same day twice. That's not something most people can say about their jobs. And so I would encourage young people who are thinking, gosh, it seems so terrible out there right now for American law enforcement. I'd say no, take a look at it. It's a job where you absolutely have a sense of mission and a sense of purpose. What would you say to a young person, especially a young woman who's thinking about, I might want to be a cop, but I don't know? What would you tell them?
I'd say it's the best job in the entire world. I didn't want to sit behind a desk and earn a paycheck growing up. My mother was an accounting technician, and I knew I didn't want to sit at a desk. Although the irony is the last 3 years as an administrator, I've been sitting at the desk. But what I would tell them is it's an exciting environment. It's challenging every day. It could be challenging from call to call, but really what it is an opportunity for you to use your mind, for you to have discipline in terms of being physically fit. And the job has gotten more and more complex over the years. Back when I got into law enforcement, the academy was about 4 months long. It's now no less than 6 months. And training used to be about 13 weeks if you use the standard FTO model. Well, it's now closer to probably 4 or 5 months if you're using the PTO model in some cases, in some departments. So it's much more complex than it used to be. Our law books are probably 2 to 3 times the size, at least here in Colorado, than they were 30 years ago. So it's just gotten more and more complex. So we need people who can think on their feet. We need people who are really smart and can interpret laws and be able to identify elements of crimes. And we need people who are willing to be physically fit and to devote some time to becoming physically fit to be ready for the job. And it's really the total package. You want to be holistically ready for every day. And I can't think of a more exciting job out there.
Absolutely. And I would agree with all of that. Now, when we're looking at American law enforcement, and again, we have got to acknowledge that we're in a very difficult time. What would you say to the public about what can the public do to help support their local law enforcement?
It can be something as simple as dropping off cookies at the police department. It can just be a kind word. We have a lot of athletic events where I work, and it means just the world to me if somebody just comes up and pats me on the shoulder and thanks me for my service. But we have groups that will drop food off at the PD, really for no occasion or around the holidays. But it's just those little small things, and not the agency I'm at now, but one of the agencies I worked at in the Denver metro area. School children would draw pictures for us and drop those off, and little notes of appreciation. It meant the world, and I've kept some of those pictures over the years. I've kept some of those notes over the years, and I still have all of them. It means so much to me as an individual that someone recognizes that my service truly is selfless, and that I'm there so that they can be safe. And I think just a kind word is worth more than anything. But I still love cookies. People can always send cookies.
Bring cookies, people. Everyone loves cookies.
So true.
Lastly, what I want to end with is I want people to know what philanthropic things NALI is involved in, and how they can take a look at your organization. What kind of things are you guys involved in?
I believe one of the most important things that NALI does is host a mentoring program for members who want to be teamed up with a senior woman in law enforcement of rank. So even though we're an executive organization, we allow line level officers, we allow civilian supervisors to join, and then they can be mentored by someone who is a senior executive. So I think that's one of the things that we do most within law enforcement to give back. We have a 501c3 foundation, and we are able to do a lot of training through the COPS office, through the Department of Justice, the Bureau of Justice Assistance. We're active in being involved in many grants and grant research regarding gender and training and law enforcement. So we're sort of widespread there. We have an annual conference, although in 2020 it was our first virtual conference. And the most stunning part of that conference for me was I was able to interview Representative Val Demings, and just hearing about her experiences as a young law enforcement officer many decades ago, and really what she's seen of the cultural turmoil going on now.
Absolutely. And your organization and the conference is just so fantastic. It's meant a lot to me personally, and to a lot of women around this nation. And Commander, we appreciate you spending some time with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Betsy. I really appreciate it.
If you would like more information about the National Police Association, visit us at nationalpolice.org.